anyone that wants to join us with their camera, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, it is now 3:03. So maybe we'll go ahead and get started. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming to our 4th capacity building seminar. These are new events that the Wright County Economic Development Partnership has been offering this year. We're looking at ways that we can help provide benefit to the community of Wright County, our members, our partners, our business owners, and our residents. So we've had a few different events that have focused around sustainability. We've had an event about pedestrian experience and another about small business financing. But today we're going to be talking about economic development trends in Wright County, including workforce and regional recovery. And we have 3 fantastic guest speakers today. So I'm happy that we can invite Commissioner Steve Grove, Labor Analyst Luke Greiner, and Research Manager Maurice here from Greater MSP and from DEED to present to us and give us the information we're looking for. So as a brief introduction, I would just like to read a little bit about Commissioner Grove and give you guys a little background. He is our state's principal workforce and economic development commissioner. He's focused on empowering the growth of Minnesota's economy for everyone. And under his leadership, the department works on growing the state's workforce, closing the opportunity gap, and providing business and startups the support that they need to grow and thrive in Minnesota's economy. Commissioner Grove was previously an executive director at Google for 12 years, most recently serving as a founding director of Google's News Lab, a global division of the company that partners with media companies and startups to drive innovation. Mr. Grove has built teams in over a dozen countries and launched partnerships around the world, including a global technology training effort that trained over 500,000 people every year. Fantastic. Commissioner Grove also led Google's civic engagement work, including the company's nonpartisan voter information and get out the vote efforts. He previously built YouTube's news and politics team, launching the first partnership programs for news organizations, nonprofits, and political candidates in the technology company. In 2018, Commissioner Grove moved from Silicon Valley to Minneapolis, Minnesota, with their toddlers. Their family came here. So with that, Commissioner Grove, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, Julian, I'm just honored to be here and happy to begin a conversation.
Thank you. So yeah, we were looking to see what information you could share with us about economic development trends in Wright County or statewide, and just interested to get your perspective. And again, we appreciate you being here today.
Well, thanks, Jolene. It's good to see you. Thanks, everybody, for taking some time out of your busy days to gather together here today. I'm honored to be here with my colleague, Luke Greiner from our Labor Market Information Office, and Cameron Mocht as well, who leads a team of regional analysts across the state. And Maurice, it's always good to be with Greater MSP. It's such a great organization for Minnesota and for the region. It is a crazy time in our economy, is maybe the first sentence I will say. It is one of the more unique windows that we have been in as a state and as a country for a whole host of factors. And many of you as economic development leaders know them very well. But I think it's just important to remember that this is a time when data looks a little bit different, when trends are a little bit harder to grok, and when we can kind of feel the feet shifting underneath, or the ground shifting underneath our feet. So many new things are happening in our economy. We're already in a period that was tumultuous and accelerated on a whole host of fronts. And the pandemic, in many ways, just amplified so many of those trends in ways that we as a state really need to be on top of. You know, every time there's a disruption in our economy, and of course, COVID-19 certainly created one, states, cities, regions come out on the other side, either doing better or doing worse, or with momentum or a lack of it. And it's never inevitable where a particular location, how a particular county or state or region or city are going to do. And while we've had a great and diverse economy in Minnesota, we at DEED are really treating this moment, I think, with the urgency and focus that it deserves, because where Minnesota heads in the next 5 to 10 years, based on what we do in the next 5 to 10 months, is of great consequence to us all. And I say that because we are now sitting at a juncture where we're the recipient of billions of dollars of federal funding, that we have an opportunity at local and state levels to invest in what this next chapter of our economy is going to look like. And we know the chapters that we've been through. And the great thing about the next chapter is we get to write it together. And how counties and how states and how cities and how leaders write that chapter is going to say a lot about the kind of state that we want to be. We're sitting on top of a very disruptive time as it relates to COVID. We're sitting on top of a huge moment of reckoning on race in our state and in our country and in our world. The inequalities in Minnesota's economy are well known, I'm sure, on this call. And of course, the murder of George Floyd and all that followed highlighted that for the world. And while every state and region is dealing with this and grappling with it on a whole host of levels, we know in Minnesota that if we want to change the perception of our state, if we want to make our state truly a place where everyone can succeed, we have to do things that we haven't done before. So it is just a really important juncture for Wright County, for Minnesota, for our country. And we want to meet the moment at DEED. And meeting the moment means working very closely with business, very closely with economic development officials, very closely with workers to make sure we're investing every penny of the hard-earned taxpayer dollars that we pull in into thoughtful and pragmatic and innovative programs and initiatives. So, DEED's job, essentially, as you all know, is to pump money back into the economy to help it grow. And last year alone, we did that to the tune of $563 million, over $100 million more than we spent the year before. That's a huge amount of money when you think about the fact that that is taxpayer dollars, again, that we are spending to grow the state's economy, some of them federal, some of them state, but all of them from the pockets of hardworking Minnesotans. So it is a unique moment in our history. We are in the process right now at DEED of moving forward with the most robust jobs bill in the history of Minnesota. We got hundreds of millions of dollars in this last jobs bill to create programs to help grow our economy. Many of them are on the way out the door. Some of them have already gone out the door. In fact, the most pressing one has a deadline of midnight tonight, the Main Street COVID-19 Relief Grant Program, which had a very unique 10-day window open for small businesses across the state, has yet, 9 more hours for folks to apply. So go to mn.gov/deed. If there's any small businesses in Wright County that you think would benefit, please tell them to go and apply. And we have, a child care economic development grant program. We have a small business technical assistance grant program. We have a Main Street revitalization program that focuses on corridors that were damaged by the events of the last year and a half. And then we've got, a lot more programming on the way. In the middle of October, we'll be launching a capital grants program, another $18 million to help new buildings get built. It's kind of like bonding, but it's done with state cash. And then later this fall, we have another $75 million coming in the State Small Business Credit Initiative, which is a really unique federal program that allows us to help inject capital into markets where there's gaps and help small businesses and startups grow. So we are looking at both a venture capital approach to that money, but also more support for small businesses, and particularly for small business founders and entrepreneurs who might usually be overlooked. So there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity out there. And rather than go into all the programs, I can refer you to our website. We do have one blog post, and maybe I'll pop it in the chat here in a bit, that sort of lists them all and helps you navigate which ones make sense for whichever business you are in. We just published this last week. But it's important just to recognize that the moment we're in and the amount of opportunity that even already exists for our economy. We are, of course, already looking towards the next legislative session, and you would usually look at this next session as kind of an in-betweener year. We'll do some bonding, maybe a little bit of budget, whatever. But because we have another $1 billion of ARP to be spent, this next session is going to look very much not like an off year. It's going to look like an on year. And by the way, every legislator in the state's up for election next fall because of the way the calendar works. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation. And the governor has pulled together, with DEED being the primary agency staffing and building this, a council of 15 advisors from across the state, across industries, across perspectives, to give him advice on how we as a government should think about spending that money. And there's a whole host of ways you could put $1 billion to work for economic growth. We are really interested in the ways that we can make that money go as far as it possibly can to really invest and nurture these one-time funds into lasting effects for Minnesota's economy, and really to achieve the objective of a recovery from COVID-19 focused on those that have had the biggest barriers to success over the last couple of years. We've all seen that story play out in Minnesota, and we really want to reverse it. So that's a big task we have ahead. That council will be giving the governor and our team advice over the next 8 weeks. By mid-November, we'll hear sort of a final presentation from these leaders. And then the governor, of course, will put a budget forward in January that will reflect that and other feedback and priorities that are on his radar, and we'll work with the legislature and move forward. But the voice of Wright County in that conversation and in the conversation about where the jobs bill goes this next session is really important. And so I hope you as leaders are. Can you guys hear me now? Okay, I think I was muted for just a second. Maybe somebody didn't like what I was saying about the governor's council or something. Anyway, no, just kidding. But it's a huge opportunity for Wright County to have your voice heard in this conversation too. So I think for us in St. Paul, the more often we're hearing from counties outside of the core metro, the better off we are. So I'm on the road a bunch. I'm glad you are all too. And so we take very seriously this idea that the economic growth of the entire state is critical to this next chapter. You know, Wright County, and I'm sure Luke will go into greater detail as an expert in the region, is doing all right. The county is coming along. You know this well because you live there. We have seen your economy provide over 43,000 jobs at almost 3,500 establishments across the county. That's a huge contribution to Minnesota's overall growth. Wages in the county they range. They're averaging around 48K per family. Retail is huge, of course, as is manufacturing with over 6,000 jobs. We're very bullish on the manufacturing industry in Minnesota. We think it's an overlooked, provides over $50 billion in GDP to Minnesota every year. In terms of the comeback from the pandemic, you know, I think it's been difficult for every county in the state. Employment was down about 5.2% this year from the previous year in Wright County. That puts you kind of roughly in the top third, which is, I guess, better than being in the bottom 2/3. But of course, we know your employers are facing workforce shortages of record proportions, and I'm sure you're hearing that. I have to hear your questions and thoughts, but this is a problem and a challenge that, while I know this group's focused on economic development, in our both workforce and economic development, they are all part of this that need them. And we are trying to do different things to get different results at DEED. And our feeling has been, you know, we sit on top of a system that has been around for some time. And there's some things about it that work today if you were trying to create a workforce system to meet employers' needs. And so we have really reformed how we reach out to job seekers. We're being very busy. My team's a little uncomfortable with it. They're like, calling people directly, like setting up appointments to help them find jobs, like without them even calling us. But the moment requires a more assertive stance. And so that is what we're doing. And it is an adaptation of our model, and it's awkward and different and weird, but it is yielding results. We're doing hundreds of our placement agency that's perfect, but that kind of, you know, being on the balls of our feet on this versus on our heels is where you should expect your economic development workforce development agency to be. And we're going to continue to experiment with more ways to get job seekers in front of great opportunities. And that means us getting out into libraries, getting out into community centers, getting out into travel reservations, really ramping up our web presence. If you look at minnesotaworks.net, which thankfully we're revamping today, it looks like it was built in about 1997. We have these sort of internet tools that are just so antiquated to the point of almost frankly being embarrassing from my perspective. The state owes its citizens better than that. So we're investing a lot of money in revamping some of our platforms and our ways of engaging with job seekers. And look, we're trying to partner. I mean, that's what your state economic development agency should do, whether it's with other orgs like Maurice at Greiner M.P.A, or whether it's with the counties, or whether it's with businesses. You know, we don't think we can sit around in St. Paul with all the answers. And so the more we can hear from you and what you think you need and what your agency should be doing better, the better we'll be able to serve you. That's our job. So I'm just grateful for the chance to speak to all of you today. I just want to thank you all for what you're doing to grow our state's economy. These are jobs and positions that you all took, I think, with an eye towards caring about where you live and how to grow it. And you probably never knew what you're getting into until COVID struck, and we all kind of had to change what we're doing and adapt to it. And I'm just proud to live in a state where we have been able to navigate that to the best of our ability. We have just such thoughtful leaders like yourselves, just helping counties and regions grow and navigate really tough challenges. So thanks for having me. And Julian, I'll turn it back to you. I'd love to hear questions and thoughts, or even directions you'd like me to take, because we can certainly cover some more topics here in the time that we have.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Commissioner Grove. That information was extremely helpful. It's really encouraging to hear that you have such courageous and creative ideas of how we can try to address the workforce shortage. As you mentioned, the workforce is a key element of economic development. And so all of us in these positions, business owners, employers, we're trying to be creative and courageous in our attempt to get people on board, get people reemployed, and meet the needs of our communities. Thank you again. Now I would open it up for any questions. If anybody has a question, you can unmute and you could interrupt me, or you can put it in the chat box. Also, I wanted to comment while we're looking to see if anything pops up in the chat about that. I am interested in hearing the information that comes out of this group of individuals that you'll be coming to convene and provide information in November. So we'll look forward to that. And also, it's interesting to hear you speak about the Main Street revitalization program in that short window. I noticed that, and I tried to push that information as much as I could. I wondered if you could address a little bit the greater Minnesota need versus the metro need, and how that's being sort of addressed there through DEED.
Yeah, thanks, Jolene. I mean, one example might be this Main Street revitalization program, where we know that business corridors themselves, so clusters of businesses in one stretch, really suffered throughout COVID due to the shutdowns, due to consumer confidence, due to decreased demand, frankly, due to Amazon. And so that Main Street revitalization program that is looking at how to help business clusters, I think, is really relevant to greater Minnesota as much as it is the corridors that were hit by the civil unrest following the murder of George Floyd. So we know, I come from a small town myself. I grew up in Northfield, and our Main Street is a wonderful, great place to live. But even before the pandemic, it suffered. And and Walmart and Target and Cub come to town, and on sort of the other Main Street, which is usually the highway approaching a small town, you just see Main Streets kind of suffer a bit more. So I think this is something that we're passionate about at DEED and think is important. And I'd be curious to ask this group, maybe as a way to start this conversation, what you think the biggest needs are in Wright County and in greater Minnesota. I hear childcare, I hear housing, and I hear workforce is kind of the three that hit us a bunch. And so I don't know, from those who have joined us today, does that resonate as some of the bigger challenges, or are there other things happening in Wright County that DEED should know about that we should prioritize as we think about our agency and our work moving forward?
Yes, anyone can feel comfortable to leave a message in the chat box or give us a thumbs up if you feel like things are going well and your reactions. And I will address the messages that come into the chat. And if we want to share that information with you, Commissioner Grove, I know that you're unable to stay on till the end, but we might have something pop up before the end, and we'll communicate through email about it and make sure we get questions answered.
Yeah, what are you all seeing? I mean, what's for the Wright County folks in the call, like what's on your minds for the growth of the county and our economy?
Is anybody willing to speak up and throw out some information, some ideas and thoughts? Nothing like putting you on the spot, right? Well, I can tell you from my perspective, and working with 16 cities within Wright County and 11 area chambers of commerce, I'm seeing growth across Wright County. We're seeing expansions and relocations within our industrial parks, a lack of available acreage within our industrial parks, the great demand for housing of all types, the workforce housing, senior housing, affordable housing, market rate, and multifamily is just booming across the county. We're seeing commercial coming back a little bit more as well. And so, but again, every meeting I go to, every chamber of commerce, every business retention and expansion visit, I'm hearing workforce, and to the point where people are very concerned about if their ability to continue to grow without having access to the workers that they need. And so Wright County doesn't have as high of a population as some other counties, but we are seeing growth as the third fastest growing county in the state. So I think that will help. We're really trying to retain our residents and try to get them into Wright County jobs and spread the message that they don't have to leave the county to get a high quality of life.
Yeah, no question, right? And I know there are regional marketing efforts across the state to attract talent and drive action, and that's really important. I will say, just for something you to keep an eye on, we at the department are going to be launching kind of a new front door for all of our efforts in the coming roughly few weeks to a month. It's going to be a new website focused on attracting businesses and talent to Minnesota. And of course, where you locate Minnesota is the next question, and we have some regional information on that side as well. But we're really honing in on this message of coming here to participate in a very purpose-driven economy and to build something that matters. This idea of building what matters in Minnesota, I think resonates because we're a state that, more so than any other state in the country, helps small businesses survive once they've started. So we have the #1 business survivability in the country. If you start something here, it's more likely to run in 5 years than any other state in the country. And I think that's partially the ecosystem we have, but it's also the people. Like, people start stuff here that they really care about. It's not just the next, attention grabbing app that, you build on a phone that kind of sucks your time and there you go. No, people are building life-saving medical technology, incredible agricultural innovations. The future of retail is happening here. So this idea that we're a state where people build things that matters is really powerful. And it's something that applies to the entire state, not just the metro area. So we're leaning into that messaging, and we're going to lean into that campaign. I'm not going to promise you a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign. That's not the kind of budgets we sit on top of here, but you can appreciate and expect a great package of messages and collateral and content that is useful in bringing that message forward. So we're excited about that. I think the government needs to do a better job of selling the state. This is not a time to be humble. And I know that Minnesota has a sort of a humble DNA, and I share that too. It's not like we need to be braggadocious, but in a post-pandemic disrupted economy, when everyone's fiercely competing for talent and business growth, you can't just sort of expect it'll come to you. That's too cocky to think that you can just sort of sit around and it will happen. You have to be assertive. So we are trying to lean forward on that. It's something we care a lot about, and so we're going to lean into that more in the coming weeks.
Absolutely. Well, I would love to thank you again, Commissioner Grove, for joining us this afternoon and sharing your insight and your outlook on the state of Wright County and the state of the economy in Minnesota. I will email you with any follow-up questions or concerns, and hopefully I will run into you sooner than later at one of our events. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
And thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Enjoy EDM. And I'll say this because I know Luke's going to speak here too, and I say this with sincerity because we're very lucky in our state to have such great public servants. The team that Cameron and Luke lead, focused on regional analysis, honestly is one of the highlights of my time as commissioner, getting to hear their wisdom about our state. We have a really great research group at the agency, and the whole reason it exists is not just to give me information where our economy is headed, but also to give state officials and local officials and county officials and developers a sense of what's happening. And never has that been more important than in the time that we're in now, where unlocking what this all means through data helps us make smart decisions. So I'm sure Luke will have a lot to share here on it, but it's just helpful at the regional level to get that kind of guidance. So looking forward to you hearing from him. And thanks for having me, Jolene. We'll talk to everyone again soon.
Thanks. Take care of yourself. So next, I would like to introduce our second speaker, Mr. Greiner. I've known for a number of years now. Luke has been presenting fantastic data about the state of our workforce and many other details. I first saw Luke present when I was with the city of Princeton, and I love his dry sense of humor, and I love the way that he holds your attention, even when sometimes the numbers are big and sometimes they paint a picture we don't want to see, and other times they've really got some intricate details. So Luke Greiner, let me take a look here quickly, if you don't mind. I got to pull up your bio. Luke is the Department of Employment and Economic Development's regional analyst for Central and Southwestern Minnesota. Luke conducts research, writes publications, and provides presentations about Greater Minnesota's economy, job market, industry trends, career, and educational decision-making, as well as higher education outcomes. So again, Luke, I would like to thank you for joining us this afternoon and welcome you to our capacity building seminar. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jolene. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm always excited to connect with folks from economic development because it's, I work with such a wide variety of folks. It's pretty important stuff, and even though I focus most of my research on the labor market, I guess I've been in the fortunate position where my information has been really valued, really since coming out of the Great Recession. So I'm going to try to get my slides into presentation mode. And also try to, can you see the full screen now, Jolene? Fantastic. All right. So this first slide deck, and I apologize for using PowerPoint slides. I know they're not riveting. by any means, but it's almost impossible for me to talk about data like my commissioner did without slides with some sort of visual aids. You'd all fall asleep super quick. But I just want to give you an overview of what's going on most recently with our state. That'll kind of set some context for Wright County and how to think of Wright County's situation in this whole recovery. So our unemployment rate has been ticking down, roughly 1/10 of a point for the last few months. Lately, it's been actually from people gaining employment, which is a phenomenal way to actually see that tick down. Most of last year when we were seeing the unemployment rate drop is from folks leaving the labor market and leaving the labor force. And that's one of the ways your unemployment rate can actually drop, but it's not the way we want it to, because we obviously need as many people in our labor force as possible. And I'm not going to go through this whole slide full of information. Jolene, I think you can probably share this out to the members. So that's kind of what I typically rely on. But some of the key takeaways in August, from July, we gained about 4,300 jobs, which is a gain of about 2/10 of a point in Minnesota. That is roughly the same as we had nationally for growth, so kind of matching that. But we have a long ways to go. So if you compare August 2020 compared to August 2021, we're still seeing some sectors down in employment, and we have a long ways to go. So statewide, we've only clawed back about 2/3 of the jobs that we lost in the 3 months of the kind of the pandemic recession, that February, March, April, but mainly that March and April. So that would mean we need to add back 128,000 jobs. So that gives you a little bit about a little perspective about that 4,300 jobs that we actually gained. So we got a long ways to go. A lot of the gains that we're seeing are in the industries that were most impacted, like the leisure and hospitality sector. So it's fantastic to see them rebounding, but obviously it's never fast enough. And as is the case in this recovery, it's that V is starting to slow down a little bit. So we would like that V-shaped recovery where we bounce back to where we were to be a little bit steeper, but it's going to take a while for certain. So moving on to Wright County, just to give you an idea of what employment trends are going on in your county. So for the last 2 decades, you've had some really serious employment growth. So this is covered employment. This doesn't include self-employment, but for the most part, this is, the huge vast majority of your jobs, over 90% of your jobs would be counted in this. And you can see the hiccup there from the Great Recession. And you can see just a fantastic strong recovery coming out of that until 2021. This is looking at the first quarter. So we don't have, really, really good accurate data for Wright County beyond the first quarter of 2021. But by the first quarter of 2021, we're still down quite a bit. So hopefully we can kind of get back to where we were, but definitely some losses here, just like everywhere else across the state. Your county is pretty unique in its industrial mix because of the huge retail presence you have. So statewide, healthcare and social assistance is our biggest industry, followed by manufacturing. In your county, it's actually third, and retail trade is first. And you all kind of know that. Everybody that's kind of been through Wright County probably has put that together. Retail is really important. And because it's so important, we want to know what's going on with retail trade. So in this chart right here, it just basically, probably the most basic way you can look at your economy in Wright County. The blue bars represent the amount of jobs you have, and the green dots are the average annual wages in each of those sectors. This is for 2020, which would be a 4-quarter average. And, so you're unique, definitely compared to the state, compared to most, metro counties, very different compared to rural counties. You're different. Being a collar county, you just have a very unique mix, kind of that service providing, heavy hitting in the retail trade sector. So where did we lose jobs in Wright County? Most of our industry sectors lost jobs, just like the state. You can see manufacturing there down A lot of that is in your fabricated metal and machinery manufacturing. That's really where a lot of those losses are. Educational services, we saw a lot of widespread losses in that sector also. I did want to make a note, the large gains in finance and insurance was actually just a change in employment reporting from a pretty large company. So unfortunately, it looks really great, but it doesn't actually mean you guys had 734 new jobs in finance and insurance. It was just an employer that was changed the reporting in the first quarter of this year to more accurately represent their employee base. But this is where we lost jobs. And when I say jobs, it means anything from maybe a job that somebody works for 10 hours a week, or it could be a 60-hour a week. We don't have a threshold on what we consider to be a job, as long as there's at least 1 hour of employment recorded there. And that stacks up against the state in kind of a unique way. So you can see that finance and insurance, we can kind of just toss that out. I kept it in there, but you can see it's, so if anything, it probably matched the state. I guess that would be a good proxy, just basically staying even keel. One of the things I did want to point out there is accommodation and food services. So the hardest hit sector by the pandemic recession. You can see in gray there, this is down towards the bottom. That sector statewide lost about 1/4 of its employment, but in Wright County, it only lost about 6.5%. So your accommodation and food services establishments did comparatively really well, which is really important being a service providing sector. If you go up to retail trade, you can see roughly the same as the state in terms of loss of jobs there. But there's a fair number of industries where Wright County outperformed the state in terms of losses. But this kind of leads us to what happens after those losses occurred. So this, I feel like, is probably some of the most important stuff we talked about last year. Employment loss, what are we going to do? How are we going to stay afloat? Are people going to buy our stuff? Things like that. Probably in the middle of last summer, that was a concern until we got to last fall. Then the conversation shifted to, we want to recover those jobs. We want to hire, we want to reopen. And that has been a challenge across the state. For those jobs that were lost, truly letting someone go, if that company's still in existence and looking to continue operations, they're probably trying to hire those people back. And where we saw the most amount of losses in that accommodation and food services, a lot in retail, a lot in education, a lot of those jobs are fairly low paying. And then we had we had a shift in our unemployment insurance benefits. That allowed people to maybe reevaluate, is that the type of job I want to go back to? Do I want to move into a different sector? Do I want to maybe try to climb the career ladder? So we have our labor force that's got maybe the opportunity of time to reevaluate their situation in the economy. Well, at the same time, our employers are posting record numbers of job openings. So this line chart here shows you our fourth quarter job openings. We do a job vacancy survey. We send out a survey to employers in the second and fourth quarter of each year. And we ask them, how many jobs they have and to tell us a little bit about them. And what we find is that employers have a pile of jobs in, so fourth quarter data's out for 2020. We should have second quarter of this year shortly. And I'm going to assume, even though I shouldn't, I won't tell you what my mom said about assuming, but I'm going to assume and go out on a limb that we're going to have really high numbers for the second quarter also, just because intuitively what I see, what I hear, employers are struggling to hire. And that means that some of the openings that are showing up maybe in the fourth quarter of 2020, they might also show up in the second quarter of 2021. Depending on the occupation or the staffing strategies, some of these might go on for a long time and just roll over from survey to survey where they're just remaining unfilled. So also important to note, the orange dots there, that's the nominal median wage offer by employers. So if you look at all openings, combined, they offer about $15.42 an hour to start in central Minnesota. If we inflation adjust that back to 2001, that amounts to about $10.55, which is up substantially from, back then when it was $8.50, but fairly flat. And one thing that we look at when we're thinking about this labor market constriction and employers having a difficult time hiring is, are the wages being reflected of their difficult time hiring? So the more difficult it gets to hire, the more we should start seeing the inflation adjusted wages outpace inflation. We need to see real wage growth. For instance, I talked to an employer, they might have been in Wright County. It was either Wright or Sherburne County, I can't remember, but it's right in your area. They've done 3 pay raises this year across the board, just kind of like a cost of living adjustment. They expect another one in the spring. And I'm starting to field more and more calls from employers to look at their wages, not only, what do we need to be starting people at, but how are we going to keep people? And that's kind of turning into a lot of wage compression for middle managers and first line supervisors, because it's difficult to start somebody out that's first day on the job making 50 cents less than somebody that's been there for 5 years. So I think we might just be seeing the very beginning of some pretty serious wage growth in the fight for people, because I've been saying this for years now. In the pandemic, like the commissioner said, it really basically just amplified these impacts. I was talking about this in 2019, 2018. The tight labor market that we had then didn't go away. It got disrupted and then it sped up. And in the end, we're back where we were in 2019, maybe times 5. So now you got to have something better. You got to have a better job, better managers, better benefits, something. Have actual strategies to keep your employees. And I hear a lot about employees ghosting employers and things like that. And I think one of probably the untold stories is why that's probably happening. And I don't necessarily think that it's because the next generation of workers have different values than previous generations. I think our current generation of workers have many more options than our previous generations ever had. And because of that, if I'm a job seeker, job seekers that I do know right now actively seeking work, they don't apply to just one job. They're applying to as many jobs as they can because they can. Why not? Shoot for the moon. And if you have all this available options in front of you, you're going to take the best one. And if the best one changes tomorrow, you're going to take that. And as far as not, calling an employer and saying, yeah, I'm not going to show up, that's kind of the same thing we heard from employees when employers wouldn't call them and say, you didn't get a job. You just wouldn't hear anything right back during the Great Recession if you applied for a job. Unless you got it, you typically didn't hear anything unless they had some sort of form letter. They would say, thanks for your interest, but no thanks. So I think this is kind of the phenomenon that's happening. I really don't see this as a shift in values or anything like that. So like I said, we have record numbers of openings and they're across the board. This is the way this shakes out as far as who's hiring central Minnesota. You can see the majority of our openings there, the largest share there in sales and related occupation. So again, this is for a 13 county area, sales and related, closely aligned with retail trade, your biggest sector. If that is the biggest group of openings, that also means that Wright County employers are competing against a lot of other employers across, maybe your region, maybe in Sherburne County and Scott County and Stearns County. So you have to have something better, most likely, because the person that you probably are going to hire is already working or has the opportunity to work anywhere where they're qualified for. You can also see food prep and serving related with the second most amount of openings. Again, if they were let go from that sector, which a lot of people were, now that sector needs to figure out how to hire them back. And that's a super hard challenge. You can see the wages there are nothing to write home about, but a huge need. And then on top of that, we kind of end up with this perpetuating cycle where you can't keep your bar and grill open because you don't have enough employees. And if you have to be closed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then you have to let go of those employees that would be working, and then it's kind of feeding the beast. And that also creates instability that might not look that attractive either. Even though the demand for their products is high, the the applicants, coming in the door might not be enough to actually keep them afloat, keep them open. Which leads us kind of to the whole labor force talk, right? I talked about that, I mentioned that briefly, but I just have to move around my Zoom stuff. This chart right here is just showing you our Wright County labor force estimates. And you can see, if we smooth that out, some pretty nice gains. Like you were saying, Jolene, like Wright County has just been the benefactor of some pretty phenomenal growth. And you can see the pandemic recession there where it bottomed out, and you're slowly starting to claw them back. That's fantastic. That's not happening everywhere. So even though that chart might look dire, I would be thankful that it's actually climbing back. That's good news, because our labor force growth is slowing. You also are in a position where you have a younger demographic. So I was in a different area of the state last night presenting, and they have an older demographic. So the conversation about the older workers leaving the labor force, potentially retiring and not coming back, it's really, really important for them. Less important for you. I'm not saying that we should just disregard our older workers that might be eyeing retirement, but it's much less of a problem in Wright County than most greater Minnesota counties. And when we look towards the future, you can see that you're one of the chosen, I guess. So the state demographics center does our county labor force projections, and you can see there's only 17 counties there that are projected to actually grow their labor force in the next decade. And Wright County is in there with some of the highest, certainly the highest there in kind of west of the metro. And if our labor force participation rate doesn't recover, these projections, mind you, were created many years, well, like 3 years before the pandemic. So I'm not exactly sure how this will pan out, but up until the pandemic, this is kind of our best projections on what'll happen. So I thank you very much for your time. I went over mine. We have regional profiles. Jolene, I'm sure you've shared that out, but for anybody that hasn't seen them, it's a tremendous document, particularly when you get maybe interest from a company looking to move here, or a site selector or something like that. Most of the questions they have, you're going to be able to answer from our regional profiles. So they're highly recommended. I write lots of stuff. My whole team does. You can check us out using those links. Yeah, and I'd be happy to take questions now or at the end or whatever works for you, Jolene.
Thank you so much, Luke. Again, your information is always interesting, and your delivery is on point. I was interested in the connection that you drew between people feeling like employers feeling like their employees weren't communicating well, but then back in the recession, the employees feeling that way about employers. And you're right, I do recall that was a trend back then. So I agree with you. I don't think the next generation of people have no values when it comes to working. I think it's just a different environment, and they have to navigate things differently than we did, or that our generation before had. So thank you.
Kind of like kids with loud music, right? I think.
Right.
We'll always be complaining about those darn kids and their loud music.
Hey, I thought
couple
we
years
were those
I'll be doing
kids.
it.
I thought we were those kids with the loud music, Luke.
Yeah. Pretty soon I get to complain about them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with that, then I am going to go ahead and offer anyone the opportunity to put a question in the chat. We will address them either at the end or after the presentation. And next, with no further ado, so as not to go over our time, and I don't want to cut Maurice short, I will quickly introduce our next speaker. Let me see, I've got it right here. Mr. Maurice Harris is currently the research manager at Greater MSP Partnership in St. Paul. Joining Greater MSP in 2015, Maurice's roles include conducting research to support economic development and market research efforts for the recruitment, retention, and attraction of businesses to the region. He is also responsible for the development and maintenance of intelligence directly related to supporting regional economic development efforts. Prior to Greater MSP, Maurice was a researcher with the Missouri Economic Research and Information Center, at that time, the research arm of the Missouri Department of Economic Development. His primary roles were performing target industry research, economic impact analysis, and special project research for policymakers. Originally from St. Louis, Missouri, he obtained his master's degree from the University of Missouri at Columbia in public affairs, specializing in public policy analysis and regional development, and obtained his bachelor's degree from Knox College, majoring in political science and history. When he's not working, Maurice is a city council member for the city of Golden Valley, a chairperson of the Knox College Alumni Council, and secretary on the CASA Minnesota Board of Directors. So thank you so much, Maurice, for joining us this afternoon. I'm happy that we finally got to meet, even though it's virtual, and I'm really looking forward to the information that you have to share today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jolene. Great opportunity to speak to you guys out of Wright County. Me and Luke, we kind of email from time to time as well. I'm always picking his brain for information, so it's great to be here. And I'll run through, I know we're running a little behind on time, but I'll go through what I have. Let me share screen and slideshow us. So, like with introduction, thanks so much. So, I'm going to talk about a little bit about Greiner M.P.A. Some people don't know who we are, but also more dive into our recovery hub tool that we created in the last year to kind of track the impact of the pandemic in our region. Luke, kind of with some of those details I might go through too, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the data side of it, but it's kind of a little more emphasis on that as well. So Diversity Partnership been around since 2011, 2012. Our goal pretty much to help market this region to the world and also help lead economic development efforts with business development, attraction, retention. Also look at our partnership, which is across companies in this region, as well as our cities and counties, and educational leadership as well. So that's our main goal for you as a research arm in that team. It's support our local communities and counties. So here's my X to you guys. If you ever need information, any data to help your guys' efforts and work, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help you. That's what we're here for, to help you guys do your work better. Pretty much just strategy real quick. Business investment I mentioned, grow jobs, capital investment, regional brand and image, have people know what this region is and how great it is.
Maurice, I hate to interrupt you. I just have to ask you, possibly maybe wiggle your cords. Your sound is kind of popping in and out. So if you've got a connection that you can just stabilize a little bit, I just wanted to interrupt. I don't want to lose anyone here. And this is
sorry about that.
No problem.
I'll try
go ahead and continue on.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, guys. Regional brand and image, marketing this region. We do trade shows when in pre-pandemic times, trade shows, market visits, talking to companies, telling what this region is and how great we are. And then strategic partnerships. So like Make MSP, you may have heard of that. It's our talent arm to help attract and retain talent in the region. We just started Connect MSP to connect, especially our population of color, to get in those jobs and to network better as well. So we're doing a lot of things in this region and just try to make this a better region for all. So, so the recovery hub, as I mentioned, back last year in the middle of the pandemic, we knew we wanted to create a tool that kind of analyzed what was happening in this region. A lot of data that we work with in this space is, month delay, sometimes longer. And so how can we bring together information to kind of show in real time what is going on? And so part of this is bringing together a lot of people across this partnership that work in several different sectors, such as hospitality, public sectors, like DEED, obviously, Metro Transit, the MAC, bringing together all these people to pretty much kind of get their input of like, what are you trying to look for in data? What do you want to know what's occurring? And so we worked in this kind of partnership, inside a partnership over the last year, over like 3 or 4 months to kind of know what's out there in data, what can we track, what can we pull together, what things people want to know about, because we want to make this useful for people in our partnership and for outside that, and not just we were just working inside our research shop and putting together something. And so with this, we pretty much created this tool to look at how we're progressing. We're at risk of stalling as this recovery continues onward. and putting it together into a website and a platform where people can access, look at the data, look at our analysis, and go from there to kind of help with decision making and to know what's going on. And through this process, we've been improving on it. We've made changes. So it's not a static piece. It's, if someone says, maybe this data point doesn't really tell best recovery or tracking it, we always look to improve and to continue to grow on that. I know I worked with Luke several times over unemployment claims data, which we track, and making sure we're using the right tool or right function of that to track better that information. So it's a work in progress. So real quick, and looking at data in the last month with this tool, we kind of tracked 5 main categories: health, which is really COVID cases and COVID vaccinations. Employment, we look at the MSA unemployment as well as unemployment, and we also track UI claims as well, continuing UI claims data. Travel and movement, we look at several different factors such as hotel occupancy, air travel, so passenger travel through the airport, return to office, which that Minneapolis Town Council is tracking the percent of people who have come back since the pandemic started, and restaurant bookings from Open Table. Business vitality, so we look at small business employment, percent of people are still working or in small businesses, as well as I think the restaurants probably are business vitality too. And then family vitality. So we track number of pounds of food distributed from local food banks, as well as percent of homes being sold for 250,000 and less being tracked by the Minneapolis area realtors. So looking at those factors kind of get an idea of what's occurring. Real quick, you see with health, we're kind of this kind of weird phase with Delta variant increasing again and causing cases to go up. Vaccination rates have been slowing over the last few weeks. Employment, it's steady growth, as Luke kind of pointed out with Wright County, and the region's been slow, increasing steadily, but not as fast as within our peer regions that we track as well. We're still kind of middle of the pack. Travel and movement, the Delta variant kind of, I would say, paused completely, but really slowed down. Air travel was recovering at a pretty good rate. Now it's kind of stalled. Hotel occupancy kind of stalled as well. Return to employment, we were hoping that post Labor Day was that time we all kind of rushed back to the office. We're stalled at that. So it's kind of we're in a holding pattern at the moment. Business vitality, still solid. Our small business employment, according to home base, which we kind of use as our main data source, it's been pretty strong. I think we're 5% down versus pre-pandemic levels. So that's one of our kind of our strong points, I think. And then vitality, affordable housing, as you may hear everywhere, is a challenge as well. So as I mentioned with COVID cases, kind of the alert thing, we're midsummer, we were thinking we're out of this, but then Delta showed up, cases went back up again. I think I'm guessing, don't hold me to, I think we're at our peak with this 4th wave now. So hopefully we see cases go down over the next month or two. But that kind of, stopped everything in its track of recovery. But as a peer region on that bottom table, which we track our peer region as well, we're middle of the pack. Some places more COVID cases, if you may know, with Dallas, Austin, but we're kind of middle of the pack right now with about 33 cases per month. And if you notice on our website, we do keep track. We have a nice little dial you can look at, sub-pages that kind of go more in depth with the information that we provide, research and analysis on each of these kind of dials and areas. So have to go to the website, check it out. Vaccinations, we were doing pretty well. When we first started doing mass vaccinations, we were kind of one of the leaders in the country as a state. Over time, though, it's been slowing down. I think we, at this point, from the previous week, from last week to the week before, we only went up by 1/10% statewide. As a metro region, we're about at 62% has received one dose of the vaccine, and about 63% statewide. And so that kind of puts in the bottom half of our peer group when we compare states. Massachusetts first by a lot. So that's one we need to keep track of as well. So I'm trying to keep track of time, so I want to speak to the rest. Job postings, we're about at 68,000, where it's our highest level since before the pandemic. Luke kind of pointed out that, you know, there are jobs out there at just getting people to get back to work. But we're doing pretty well with that. You know, usually our key sectors, health sciences, are pretty well. Hospitality and tourism rebounded from that very low level during last year as well. And we're doing pretty good as a region with job postings. Employment, we're doing well. We're still growing. But the last couple months been kind of, you know, very slow growth. I think we're only up 0.2% as a region from the previous month, looking at non-farm employment. Peer regions, you know, Austin is actually above their pre-pandemic employment level. So, you know, it's kind of interesting seeing what's going on in our regions as well as us. Our largest employment growth over the previous month was leisure hospitality, especially arts, entertainment, and that sector, and then professional business services. Family travel and movement. This is one where we thought we would kind of hit that moment where it kind of take off, but because of Delta variant, we've been kind of held back with air travel, with hotel occupancy rate, return to office, and transit ridership. We kind of track those, and we're seeing steady growth throughout the year. July, August, it kind of went, even sometimes went backwards with like a hotel occupancy rate, for example. And so we're kind of keep track of, hopefully with this wave coming to an end, I hope that they'll kind of start picking back up again. And so if you go to our website, you see our kind of dashboard we have here, barometer we look at, color coding from orange is kind of decline, the dark blue is baseline, so 2019 levels of activity, or in a sense with the COVID part, it's good. It kind of, you get tracked and view it by a month, or get view it by every week actually too. So that's all I have. I'll take questions or comments afterwards. So thank you.
Maurice, thank you so much for this information. All of these regional recovery dials are available for your viewing on Greater MSP's website. And I love the way that the dials will track the dates previously, so we can see what direction they're going in. It's a lot of great information that you've shared, and we enjoy being a partner with Greater MSP and our partnership with BEAD to help grow Wright County in a healthy way, do everything we can to provide solid information to our employers and to employees, and really show people that they can have a high quality of life and get a great job right in Wright County. So right at 4 o'clock, in respect for everyone's time, I sure appreciate all the information you shared with me. If anybody has any questions, you can email them to me. I will make sure they get to Maurice or Luke or to Commissioner Grove. And hopefully we can do this again maybe next year, try to make it an annual event.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. And thanks to everyone who joined us today. Have a wonderful afternoon. Enjoy the weather, and we'll see you around soon.
Enjoy the EDM conference.
Thanks.
Enjoy them.
See ya.